Today, we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Fred Rogers Cardigan Red. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Birmingham Pen Company's Fred Rogers Cardigan Red is a red ink. Shocker! To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen per day. I then put it into a Levenger True Writer with a broad nib to take my notes for this video. Now before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately dunk it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is it pushes straight up the page. The slightest bit of ink is left behind, and then the red comes in. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and it largely looks the same without traveling as far. So I expected this ink has no real resistance. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. Now I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, a lot of parts of the word high feathered out and spread quite a bit. This isn't the end of the world, but it does make me wonder about if I had to use it on important notes. This is not a really, resistant ink, and we'll see that all over here. Water with only 30 seconds and a drop put down, we see that most of that ink is getting pulled up off the page. The slightest bit of pink is left behind. Pen Flush did everything that water did and nothing more, meaning water does it, Pen Flush does nothing more. It makes me feel like water's all that's needed to clean this from your pen. Bleach completely obliterates it, leaves a little bit of a yellow staining behind, but I don't think you're going to need bleach to get this out. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Fred Rogers Cardigan Red has a viscosity of 1.67, which makes this a very wet ink. This is into the red of my bell curve. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Fred Rogers Cardigan Red has an average dry time of 16 seconds, making it very normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and this sample, like all of the other Birmingham samples, have it in a safe environment. To keep my writing sample consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. So this one was kind of a pain for me to identify when they first showed up, because their samples are distinctive, and I'm not going to beat up on that. This one had no label. Something else they do is they have their own sample labels they do. Different than everybody else, but this one was missing it, and it wasn't anywhere in the bag. It just for some reason was gone, which really, I had to seek it out. That wasn't the problem, but it did draw attention to, as I'm going through their webpage and putting down the actual full names of these inks, how Riddle Green on the bottom of the thing is actually Frank Gorshin Riddle Green, and this was Cardigan Red, so I just wrote Cardigan Red, but it's actually Fred Rogers Cardigan Red, because Birmingham really wants to stand out as having the longest names ever in fountain pens. It takes you about a page to write those names down, which I think is very funny. It really does amuse me every single time. Even the name of their company is really long. Birmingham Pen Company. Let's look at that Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. No real shading. It's okay. I'm going to tell you what, this ink makes me happy. Just saying the name makes me happy. And I'm going to likely wind up getting a bottle of it. It's not my favorite red. It's not the best red. But when something can make you happy just for being,
That's a great thing. And so that's what this ink falls into for me. So I'm not even worried. It could perform like garbage, and the name would make me want it. And it didn't perform like garbage, so there's a bonus. Extra fine, little bit darker tone, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer tiniest bits of shading in that it gets a little lighter in certain areas. Like at the beginning of over, at the end of brown, in the middle of dog, and that's it. 11 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer little bits of shading, little bits. Starts dark in the brown, gets lighter. Starts light in the over, gets a little darker. Not tons. 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby shows us no color variation. We really didn't get very much. We did get little bits, so it's not exactly on. And the scrubby for the medium showed us little bits of color variation. That's all we got was little bits. The smear test says you could likely recover it. Tomoe River. No bleeding. Of course we have ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 16 seconds to dry. Same exact tone all the way through, all three colors. Medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. And 27 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us we're not going to get any color variation, and we didn't. The smear test says you likely can't recover it, and I'll believe that. Rhodia. Rhodia gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. That spot's where the scrubby's at. I don't really count that as a bleed. I'm putting it on stupid thick. Now the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no real shading. Lovely red. Lacks a lot of properties that I do normally care for. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 12 seconds to dry. The medium's the exact same tone, so this is a very consistent tone of red. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us we're not going to get any color variation, and we didn't. The smear test says you could likely recover it. So I put this onto Apica paper, and it becomes interesting when we see the tones of the ink. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's a noticeably darker tone than we get with the extra fine. The extra fine definitely gets lighter. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It's 8 seconds to dry. Noticeably darker tone with the medium, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 12 seconds to dry. This is where I'm going to talk about stuff, like I'll call an ink boring. But boring's not bad. Boring's predictable. I know what this ink is going to do. It doesn't offer a lot of shading. It doesn't offer a lot of change from one pen to the other. Occasionally it offers a little bit. So it's boring in all the results are absolutely expected. Again, that is not a bad thing. To know exactly what that ink is going to do in your pen without ever having put it in that pen is not bad. Predictable can be nice. I love shading, but too much shading, sometimes it can be hard to know what will happen with an ink. The scrubby on this showed no color variation in the extra fine or the medium. There was no color variation. The smear test says we could likely recover it. So I looked at Franklin Christoph paper, which had no bleeding and no ghosting, and again, that boring behavior, as in very, very predictable. The 1.1 gave no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine gave that lighter tone again, only a little bit lighter. It had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. It only took 6 seconds to dry. The medium, it's a noticeably darker than the extra fine. And that's like sometimes the only notice that you get in this is that sometimes it's a little bit darker tone, and that's about it. But even still, most of the time, the tones were very much the same from the extra fine to the medium. Here we see a more drastic change. The medium has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It only took 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variations. We weren't expecting it in the writing sample. And the smear test, I just don't know that you could recover this if you smeared it. But this ink makes me happy. That's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Fred Rogers Cardigan Red, I would prefer to find an ink that complements that color on the page. Now, he didn't always wear a red sweater. He sometimes wore a blue sweater. And I wanted blue for that reason. And I wanted a very nice blue for such a nice guy. Really. I chose the Atramentis 225th Constitution Anniversary because I really like this blue. I think it's great. I think this color of blue could have gone as a Fred Rogers color. So why not? And they look great together. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, please won't you be my neighbor? I really did like that show. So what do I think of Fred Rogers Cardigan Red? You know, it's a perfectly good red ink. It performs very well. I'm going to be honest with you, everything that I really thought about it had more to do with my childhood memories. Being excited to see the trolley come on screen, the fact that he had such a soothing voice means that this ink would have had to be truly atrocious to not like it. Just the memory and association in itself. Again, it's a very well-performing, very nice ink, but what it brings as the feeling inside is worth having it just for that. It makes me smile when I use it. And I've said that about a few inks, and this is one of them. It makes me happy. Thanks for watching.